Now we know more about how callbacks work and what JSON is. Let's get to work on our employee status widget. Okay, with AJAX, the browser sends out a request to the web server, and the web server sends a response. The response is just plain text, even though the server sends back information that looks like HTML, XML, or JSON. To a web browser, those responses are just a string of characters. In other words, even though JSON is formatted to look like JavaScript, it isn't JavaScript. It's a plain text string, just a bunch of letters, numbers, and punctuation marks with no magical significance to your web browser. In order to use JSON data, we need to take this string and convert it into JavaScript. This is a process known as parsing, and fortunately, it's really easy to do. All current web browsers can do it using a single command. All right, let's get started with our employee status widget. If you want to follow along, you can launch the workspace on this page. It has all the files you'll need. Open the files index.html and widget.js in the JS or JavaScript folder. The widget.js file is empty. We'll add our programming here. We start by creating an XML HTTP request object. This new variable, XHR, holds the XML HTTP request object, which has its own set of properties and functions. Functions of an object are also called methods. Remember that the variable name doesn't have to be XHR. You can name it anything you want. Step 2 is our callback function. We start with the ready state change event, and we add our function, or callback, to it. Because there are several different ready states, we need to make sure that we're at state 4, when the server has returned all the data it will send. This lets us make sure we've received all of the JSON data. This is just the basic skeleton for the callback. It doesn't do anything yet. We'll add the program for that in just a moment. Step 3 is opening a request. In this case, we're using the get method to load a file filled with JSON data named employees.json. It's located in a folder named data. Now, in a real-world application, we'd point to a server-side script that would dynamically generate this JSON data with the most current information on our employees. For this exercise, however, we'll use a plain text file. Step 4, send the request. This step sends out the request. Remember that even though we set up the callback in step 2, the callback function doesn't do anything until after we send the request and receive the full response. In fact, you could add the programming for the callback function after this step if you wanted to, and the program would still run fine. Now let's look at our callback function in more depth. The information that the web server returns is contained in a property named response text. It's a property of our XML HTTP request object, so we access it using .syntax, xhr.responseText. Let's look under the hood by using our web browser's console. I'm going to add a line of code in the callback that prints out the response to the console. I'm going to save this file, and to run this script, we need to link it to our web page. So move over to the index.html file and add a pair of script tags. I'm going to view this in a web browser and open it up in the console. So make sure to save this page and preview it. In Chrome, you open the console from the settings menus, or the keyboard shortcut Ctrl-Shift-J on Windows or Command-Option-J on Macs. Other browsers also have JavaScript consoles. See the teacher's notes below for a list of keyboard shortcuts for other browsers. When I reload this page, see that the contents of the employees.json file appears? It looks a lot like JavaScript, but it isn't. We can see this easily by logging out another bit of information. The JavaScript typeof operator looks at the item that's listed next, in this case xhr.responseText, and returns a word indicating what type of JavaScript element it is. Let's save this file and preview our page again. Let's see what it says. Hey, it says the response is a string. We can't access the bits and pieces of the data, like individual employee names or their status, when it's in a big, long string like this. We need to turn this string into real JavaScript, and here's how. Let me remove these 2 lines of code to clean it up a bit. I'll declare a new variable, and this variable will hold the JavaScript version of our JSON data in an array of employees. JSON.parse is a method that's built into all current web browsers, even back to Internet Explorer 8. The JSON.parse method takes a string and tries to convert it into a JavaScript object. In this example, the text response we get from the server is a JSON formatted string from the employees.json file. Remember that JSON formatted data must be an array of items or an object full of key value pairs, or a combination of those two. In addition, keys in JSON formatted objects must have double quotes, and string values must have double quotes. The JSON.parse method won't work unless the string is formatted as correct JSON. If you try to parse a regular old string like "this is a string" using JSON.parse, you'll end up with a JavaScript error. When the JSON.parse method is complete, it returns a JavaScript object. Let's look at this in action. I'll send some information to the console. First, let's see what type of element the employees variable is. I'll save this and preview the page. The browser tells us that it's an object. That's because the JSON.parse method converted the text into a JavaScript array of elements. It's no longer a string of characters, but an array of items that we can manipulate with JavaScript. Unlike other programming languages, arrays are considered a type of object in JavaScript. Now let's see what's inside this variable. I'll save this file and let's preview it again. And when we preview this, we can see that employees is an array. You can tell by the brackets on each side. And inside the array is a list of objects. I can click on the array to see what's inside it, then click on an object to see what its key value pairs are. We've successfully created a script that loads a JSON file and parses it to create a true JavaScript object. In the next video, we'll finish the callback function for this project by going through the array of employee objects and generating the HTML to add to our page.